Live from Sweet Swine County, where every day is sweet, it's Split Hoof Tonight with Billy Gates and the Broken Windows Band. Hi, I'm Earl Silo, and now let's welcome Sweet Swine's one and only Cousin John.
Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another great episode of Split Hoof Tonight. Earl, good to see you.
Good to see you, Cousin John.
Hey, you know, Earl, I saw on TV the other day that numbskull Michael Moore. He says he has come up with the thing that they have to come up with a liberal paradise in the United States here. And in his paradise, everybody's employed, everybody gets free health care, free education, free food, free housing, free utilities, and only law enforcement has any guns. I thought to myself for a second, you know what, they already have that. It's called prison. Hey, did you see all the excitement down at the interstate bridge the other day?
No, what was that?
Yeah, there's some little gal up there, she's standing on the bridge and she wants to end it all. She's gonna jump off. And this group of bikers was traveling along and the head biker, he thought, I can fix this deal. So he pulls over there and he gets his way through the crowd and past the state trooper and everything. He walks up to that little girl and goes, say, before you waste everything and give it away, how about giving me a kiss? Well, just then she leans down, gives him a big old kiss, and they're really kissing at it. In fact, they stopped for a second, went back and kissed a little bit more. He stands back, old Georgie goes, whoa, sugar shorts, why would you want to waste something like that, taking your life away? Says, my mom and dad don't like me dressing up like a girl. So now we're not clear whether she jumped or whether she was pushed. So, I don't know. Anyway, you know, Earl, when I was a kid, I kind of a little bit of a deep thinker. I was always thinking to myself, you know, what happens to the sun when it goes down? So I decided one time I was going to stay up all night. And then it dawned on me. Okay, anyway. You know, and Earl, I do remember the first time that I saw a universal remote. I thought to myself, now, this changes everything. Hey folks, speaking of remotes, don't touch yours because we're going to be right back.
Destination Small Town, a KLUK TV production. The challenge to share what's happening in small towns of the Midwest. The stories are real. The pace is swift, with tourists, celebrities, and reporters from Sweet Swine County, covering stories about businesses and points of interest. Destination Small Town, in living color on the web.
Hey, thank you. Welcome back to another great episode of Split Hoof Tonight. Good to see you, Earl.
Good to see you, Cousin John.
You seem a little tense, or...
Well, yeah, I am. Well, I've been reading this latest edition of the Daily Boar.
Oh, well, you know, that's my newspaper. And folks, you can catch that on sweetswinescoop.com. And what does it say there?
Well, it says, beware of the falling bricks at Flatland High School. It goes on to Flatland High School, Sweet Swine County's only high school, of course you knew that,
Yeah.
is making plans to shore up the brick walls with more cement and concrete. The high school's former student and the county safety engineer, Elmer Plow, he told Sweet Swine Scoop, the building is historic and bears some fixing up.
Well, sure.
Bricks have been falling out primarily because, well, when the school was built, there was a shortage of masons and cement. So the local farmers just kind of stacked the bricks on top of each other like Lego blocks. Well, and now we're paying the price for that, unfortunately. And it goes on to say that Flatland High is home of the sometimes winning horseshoe team, the Flatland Prairie Dogs. And it's located 1 mile outside of Cornrow. Built in 1907. That was when they were short on the cement.
Oh, sure.
When the citizens all over the county donated the bricks from their abandoned well houses. The school holds classes every Tuesday and Thursday to prepare students to meet the challenges of life in Sweet Swine County. And many graduates go on to Purdue University, Sweet Swine County's Institute for Higher Learning.
Okay, now I understand that, but why does that get you so upset here?
Well, I'm really concerned about it because, well, I'm attending one of the school's advanced horseshoe pitching classes, and it just kind of, I'm just afraid that it's going to cut into.
let me cut you off there. We can talk about this later. Why don't we get our guests out here?
Okay.
Think we should?
All right. Okay.
Folks, let me tell you what, you're in for a treat tonight. We've got from the Castlerock Museum over there in Alma, Wisconsin, we've got Bill Walcott and Gary Schlosstein. Hey, welcome, gentlemen. Glad to have you here. So, Alma, Wisconsin. Tell the folks just a little bit about Alma, where it's at, what it's like.
Well, Alma, Wisconsin is a historic little old town that's right along the river. Lock and Dam on one side, hills on the other side, Castlerock Museum in the middle.
Oh,
Typical small town America.
all right. So, well, we're familiar with that. We like supporting the small towns. Tell us a little bit about Castlerock Museum.
Castlerock Museum actually is really a world-class museum as far as quality and extent is concerned. And it's in Alma rather than in the Twin Cities or Chicago or Vienna or Paris.
So why would you choose Alma, Wisconsin to put a world-class museum?
Primarily because that's where I live, and after I had accumulated the collection and realized the educational value it had, I felt that it had to be out where the public could see it, and I did not want to ship it off to Chicago or places like that. I was contacted by several large museums that would have been very happy to take the collection, but then I lose control of it, and I also lose the ability to enhance it.
Sure. So how did you get started collecting these things?
That was a long time ago, John. When I was a 10-year-old boy, I was walking down the street in Winona, Minnesota, haunting the secondhand shops with my couple dollars of accumulated allowance. And I went into the chicken gusses and bought a Civil War musket for $3.
A Civil War musket for $3.
Gun control laws were a little softer.
Yeah, a little softer then. So what are some of the highlights of your collection?
Well, if you go to an Arms and Armor museum, you're looking for arms and armor, and particularly when we think of armor, we normally think of the knight in shining armor, and probably the most special piece in our collection is an entire suit of shining armor of the time period of 1520. We're able to date it within 5 years of when it was built. It was constructed exactly to the measurements of the man that it was made for. It's still all present and exact today, and practically the mirror image of the one that's in the Metropolitan Museum in New York.
Wow.
Then, as far as ancient times, ancient Greece is as far back as we go, but the earliest helmet that we have, for instance, is a Corinthian helmet from 2,500 years ago. We have, during the period of the Crusades, a Crusader sword that we took to England and had authenticated as having actually been carried in the first Crusades in marvelous condition for its age. Everybody around our countryside is interested in Vikings, of course. We got a beautiful chieftain sword with gold and silver inlays in it that was found less than 20 years ago by a couple of canoers on a small river just off the Rhine. And as they were coming around the corner, this sword was starting to stick out from an eroding clay bank. Things like this are still being found today.
So now I understand that some of your displays are kind of unique. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, if you go to a museum, normally everything, you can't get close to it. You have to be back 6 feet or more. Practically everything is covered in glass or plastic or something like that. There's guards standing everywhere watching you. There's no real information on the walls themselves, nothing pictorially to explain how these things were actually used. We think that we shouldn't just have an old piece or a pretty piece. We should be able to tell a story. The story should be able to tell how the average fighting man, not just the great nobles, how they actually lived and how they actually fought their battles and won their wars in those days. And that's basically the way we've got it set up. I had a good friend who at that time was the armorer for the Tower of London who came over to Alma and spent 2 weeks with me and helped me decide how to do something differently and more informatively so we could reach out and talk to the 8-year-old boy, the 16-year-old boy, the 25-year-old student, or the person who's a very deep student of arms and armor. Nice. And we came up with this particular plan where we intermix art from the time period, not the original very, very valuable painting, but a beautiful reproduction of it, mixed in with the real authentic pieces that we have that show how these things were being used back at the time period when they were really in use. We found that that's gone over very well. We've got a big, open, expansive room that we're in. The building itself looks like a castle, a modern built castle, but a castle. It's all very well lit. We let people get up very, very close to it. Most of our exhibits, the person can get inside of 3 feet to be able to look very closely at an object. We haven't had problems with people abusing that or anything like that, and I think it's really worked out. Another thing, we've worked very hard on trying to display it so that it's pleasant in the way it looks, and our exhibit designer has done a beautiful job of presenting it that way. Beautiful enough so one of the things I'm the happiest about is when the ladies leave the place, they say, I have really enjoyed being in here. Everything is presented so nicely.
So what are some of the misconceptions about arms and armor that
You
you run
want to
into?
take that one, Bill?
Sure. Well, one of the big misconceptions is how heavy it is. Everybody just assumes that the armor's so heavy you could barely maneuver in it. But that's not the case at all. If it was so heavy you couldn't fight in it, if you couldn't mount your horse yourself, it would be too heavy to be a liability and you wouldn't have worn it. Most people, when they think of the Middle Ages, they think of the knight in shining armor, but it wasn't really until the very end of the Middle Ages, going into the Renaissance period, that you really start seeing people wearing the full plate armor. For most of the Middle Ages, they wore chainmail. We call it chainmail today. Back then, they would have called it mail, and it was just armor made from links of metal, which back then would have been riveted together by hand. So we have a sword above the bookcase in the museum, and it's a two-handed sword that would have been used by German mercenaries to break up pike formations at the end of the Middle Ages, going into the Renaissance period. And we always ask visitors, how much does this two-handed sword weigh? Because it's over 6 feet long.
Oh, wow.
And we'll get a kid come up and he'll say 50 pounds. And you think, well, how would you swing 50 pounds? And it only weighs 8 pounds. Most big weapons like that weigh less than 10 pounds. Most of the swords, like the ones we'll show you today, they weigh less than 4 pounds.
So now we are in for a treat. You did bring a few things for us to look at, I take it.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Great. What do we got?
Why don't we start with the helmet, and I'll hold it and Gary can describe it to you.
That reminds me of looking for the Fountain of Youth, like Ponce de Leon. You used to see the pictures.
That's
of.
right. That's the image that everybody thinks of when they think of the Spanish conquistadors.
Yep.
Actually, it's an Italian style. It was used all over Europe like that. Our earliest helmets are made of bronze, and after that, they're made of small pieces of iron that are ridged together. But this actually is made out of one piece of metal. There is no weld mark in it anywhere. Even the peak itself, everything was hammered out by an expert blacksmith who at that time was an armorer and whose abilities were searched for all over Europe like that. But just imagine, this entire helmet is made out of one piece into the forge until iron can be formed, hammered a little bit until the temperature changes, back into the forge, back and forth. And this just comes out ending up to be an absolutely beautiful image visually. But look at how protective it is. The swords slide off the top. It's very strong. Can take tremendous impact. Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
We were just talking about how heavy full armor is, and people think that something like this is going to be very, very clumsy, and it's not. Bill mentioned about the fact that we've got a full set of armor where a man's clothed in armor from his head to his foot, the full plate 1500s period of time. The total weight of that is only 65 pounds. Every piece in it is articulated. Look at here how the fingers move.
Yeah.
Every part of this moves back and forth. This is a gauntlet for the left hand like that, for instance. But they sewed a leather glove into the interior of it, and it feels just as comfortable as it possibly could be. On even a full suit, every plate in there, and there is over 100 plates in a full suit, is all articulated, moves back and forth on sliding rivets. A person in a full suit of armor can run up to his horse, put his foot in a stirrup, swing up without any problem at all. He he can, even if he wants to show off, go out in the lawn and do a tuck and roll and be right back up again without any problem.
Like an armadillo.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it looks like on the.
And even though this is so easy to use back and forth to hold a sword, it's really good at its punching straight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now the knight in shining armor fought on horseback. He came into the fray with a long, heavy lance, but before the battle was more than a few minutes old, horses were bumping into horses, fully armored knights were bumping into each other. They were fighting now with short weapons and weapons that were designed to hurt at short range. This is an example of a battle hammer. You notice it's got a hammer on one side. You like to head for the head with this particular side there because it makes quite a gong noise when you hit the other person on the head with it, and it temporarily disconnabulates them. If you get a good chance to puncture armor, even armor can be punctured with something like this. And even though these are very utilitarian tools, they're also always decorated. The armorer and the people that carried them also wanted their weapons to look nice, look attractive, as well as be functional in usage. So you see all kinds of little decorative
nice little engravings and
things
stuff there on it.
If you really want to see some really beautifully made pieces, we've got a number of pieces that were made for royalty back in the museum and are gold embellished, silver embellished, deeply embossed. We've got one helmet, for instance, that is entirely embossed from one side, from top to bottom. This is a left-hand dagger. Would have been worn by the person in his left hand. He would have worn the sword in his right hand. This is a sword made in the middle 1500s by a man named Johannes Wundus. Just think, we're able to know the man that actually made that because he put his signature in here. 3 king's head marks, which are the marks of Johannes Wundus, so we know that he is the exact person that made that. I also know of 2 of the ruling families of Europe that he also made swords for. So we're looking at a sword that was made by a highly respected expert swordsman. Now, as he's fighting with the sword like this, the other fellow on the other side's got the same kind of thing. And he's swinging that at him too. He's trying to catch it with this sword here too, but if he doesn't catch it with this sword here too, then that's what the left-hand dagger is for. It's to catch the other man's sword so that it catches in here like this before it gets to him like that. So he usually fought with the dagger and the sword together like that. And he used the dagger also if he had the other person down to put him away by driving it between plates of armor. Now let's take a look at the mace over there. I said that the knights fought head to head like that, shoulder to shoulder more probably. And this is a weapon that's been in use ever since the caveman. You know, the caveman found he was more effective if he picked up a club than if he just threw a rock. And
well, you know, they say that you can get more with a kind word and a club than you can with just a kind word alone.
It's what we call the persuasive power of words. In images.
Not the power of persuasion, but the persuasion of power.
This is the first mace that I ever got. I got this in England back in the 1980s. It's got an actual break mark all the way across here with brazing that shows that this was actually completely broken in half at one point in its life. It's got one of the flukes here that's broken off like that. And I always liked to, in my earlier years when I was an active judge, to keep this on my desk because it made such a nice paper weight and it rested so nicely like that. It was also very effective when we were doing plea bargaining discussions.
that's a knife.
So what's an knife?
Whenever you have a museum, one of the things that everybody wants to see is, do you have any torture items? And we don't like to emphasize them at all, but we do have a little bit of that in there because it was just part of that world at that particular time. This is an executioner's sword. It's from the late 1600s. If you'll notice, it's got a flat, straight off edge. That's because the executioner doesn't stab him when he just simply uses it to cut his head off very neatly. And in order to do a nice, neat job, he wants a heavy sword with a lot of weight out at the end like that. He often also has it engraved. This one here's got some beautiful engraving on it. On the one side, it says in Germanic script, "I carry out the wishes of my master." On the other side, it says, "May God have mercy on the soul of this poor sinner." but two-handed again, you note, and this is also what happened to a couple of King Henry VIII's first wives.
That's right. So now I noticed that executioner sword there has a scabbard with it. Is that the scabbard that went with that?
That is an original leather scabbard on that, and we rarely find that. It probably only exists in about one scabbard for maybe 20 executioner swords, and executioner swords were more carefully cared for than average swords, so an average sword would have even less. The early scabbards were all leather like that. Leather sometimes can exist if it's well preserved or well cared for. But for instance, we've got one early dagger that was dredged up out of the Thames River about probably 25 years ago, and it still had the leather scabbard intact on it, and it had not rotted away despite the fact that it's a 1400s dagger.
Wow.
And it was still in existence. But once it gets down into the muck of the Thames mud, no oxygen can get to it. Things cannot rot and they cannot rust if they can't get oxygen.
So now you're gone all over the world here to get some of that stuff. You must have some great stories. How about tell the folks one of your favorite ways that you got something or you went about getting one of your pieces?
As you travel around, you get to know various different heads of auction houses, various other collectors, various other dealers, people like that. I mentioned earlier when I was designing the museum, I had a good friend who was in the armorer for the Tower of London that came over. For example, these are these contacts that you need in order to acquire and find these kind of things. So I'm sitting in Alma one day and my cell phone rings and I pick this phone up and this voice says, "Hello, Gary." He says, "This is Chris." He says, "I'm at a little town in northern Italy. There's an auction going on here. There's a lovely helmet here. I think it's the one that was in the Hever Castle that we talked about that disappeared. Gary, I think we should bid on it, don't you think?" And so from that's how that helmet eventually ended up in our place. We were able to track down the name of the man that actually made it, who also made one for the Emperor of Austria at the time.
Oh, wow.
And so on, you know.
It's a small, close-knit world, even though it's geographically so big.
It's still first name that counts.
That's right.
Small town America, first name.
What else you got there, Earl? Oh, yeah.
I spoke of Grecian pieces before, and I mentioned that we had a Grecian helmet. In fact, we got 3 Grecian helmets that are all over 2,000 years old, being 3 different styles of Greece. This is an earpiece. This would have been the piece
that hung down
on the
yeah.
side of his helmet, and you'll notice that it hangs like this. So as that earpiece sits there, his mouth is open, his eyes are visualized, his nose is protected. He was always very interested in protecting his nose. All early helmets have nose guards of one kind.
There's some stuff up there.
Now this is the weapon that really was the main weapon of the average fighting man. Can you get me in if I stand up?
I believe so.
Okay. So imagine this fully armored knight. He's got a horse that's completely armored across the chest, completely armored across the head as well. He's charging down on this poor foot soldier, and that was 90% of the men on the battlefield. The poor foot soldier is not wearing armor. He's maybe wearing a metal helmet. That's about all he can afford. But he can manage to hold off and handle a knight with a weapon like this, which was invented by the Swiss in the 1400s. This is a time period of probably the late 1500s time period, Hellbarde. You notice it's got a big axe, it's got a pick, it's got a spike at the end of it. Here comes the horse. The horse comes, he sets that against his foot like that. He drops that chest high on the horse. The fellow driving the horse is not dumb. He's going to swing that horse. He's not going to charge the horse right into that spike, because the horse is going to be on the ground right along with him. So both the man on foot and the man on horseback know that horse is going to swing one side or another. So as that horse swings one side or another, this foot soldier called a halberdier comes up with this like this, with the spike out like that, swings at the man as he's going by him on the horse like that, tries to hook a plate of armor or something on him like that, hopefully being able to dislodge him so he falls off the horse. If he falls off the horse, like I said, he can get right back up and he can fight again. But falling off a horse slows you down for a little bit, you know, and he's not going to jump right up. In the meantime, here comes the Hellbarde, charging right over him before he can get up, holding this up like this, and then driving this down into the armor. Even though the armor is great protection against swords, things like that, you can still puncture it. And this particular Hellbarde is made during the time period when you were fighting against plate armor. And if you notice up here at the end, it's got a heavy, thick point that's made for that particular time period. Now, if he's fighting another fellow on foot, now he's back to the axe like that. A lot of early battles were fought primarily with axes, and the Hellbarde gives you a long-handled haft like that. It had tremendously effective leverage and force like that. And in one of the early Swiss battles, in which the Duke of Brunswick was leading a battle against the Swiss, the Duke of Brunswick was killed by a halbardier who put a halberd axe all the way through his steel helmet.
Wow.
Stopping apparently somewhere down just above the jawline.
That would do it. Now, you said the Swiss invented those, and I think there's some place that we still see very similar things to that today with the Swiss Guard at the Vatican.
The Swiss guards have guarded the Pope since, I think it's 1506. It's been over 500 years that they've guarded the Pope. They've never lost a Pope, but they've lost a few Swiss guards.
Yeah.
They had one battle in the 1600s in which Vatican was overrun. They managed to protect the Pope, but they lost 137 members of the 200-person Swiss Guard.
Wow.
And as a result of the reputation of the Swiss for protecting, almost all the royal families of Europe ended up hiring Swiss bodyguards to defend them, which may be another reason why Switzerland existed without being invaded.
Right. Now, for the folks out at home that are watching and they want to get some more information about that, what is your website and contact information there?
Well, they can go to castlerockmuseum.com. And they can find pretty much anything they need to there. They can also go on Facebook to find the latest about events and things like that we're doing at the museum.
Well, what type of special events do you do there?
Well, we do probably 15 to 20 events a year, ranging from talks on things like medieval falconry to our big gala that we do every June, where people can actually see sword fighting demonstrations right out on the street in front of the museum. So we do movie nights. There's really something for everybody.
Now, is the museum open like for groups to bring groups in for tours and?
Oh, definitely. We get everything from auto clubs to red hat ladies come through the museum. And right now we're open for most of the year. We're open Friday and Saturdays from 1 to 4.
Okay.
And in the summer months, from Memorial Day to Labor Day, we're open Sundays 1 to 4. But then it's other hours by appointment. So if we have a group that wants to come in on a day we're not normally open, we'll be more than happy to accommodate them.
I did notice down here there was a couple things. You had, it was a couple mugs and hats. What was
Well, we brought those for you and Earl.
Really?
So,
They did good there,
and while we thought, while we're bringing them, we might as well bring enough for the whole audience.
Hey, now there it is again, folks. Just shows you why this is the hottest ticket in town. Well, guys, thanks so much again for coming. It was really
Thanks
great
for
to
having
see this and great to meet you guys. And Earl, keep those bricks up there so you can take your horseshoe lessons too.
It's going to help because we're going to use cement this time.
And folks, if you're still watching, it means one of two things, you know that. Either you're a fan or the remote needs a new battery. Either way, thanks for watching. We'll see you again. Good night, everybody.